The moon was shining high up in the sky, casting a soft silver glow across the village. Crickets chirped in the quiet night, their rhythm steady and comforting. But amidst the peaceful sounds of nature, the sharp cries of a newborn infant echoed, piercing through the stillness. Inside a modest yet well-decorated hut, Amayala lay exhausted but overjoyed on her birthing bed. Her breathing was heavy, but her face was radiant with joy as she gazed at the tiny life in her arms. A small, fragile baby, with a tuft of white hair that shimmered even in the dim light. The village priestess, a wise old woman draped in ceremonial robes, stood by Amayala's side, her wrinkled face filled with awe. "He is a carrier," the priestess murmured, her voice barely louder than a whisper, yet full of reverence. "How can this be? A carrier has not been born in 1,000 years. The goddess herself must have sent him." Amayala's eyes widened in amazement. She stroked the baby's hair gently, overwhelmed with emotion. "A carrier?" she repeated, her voice trembling. But how? Such a child hasn't been seen for generations." The priestess nodded solemnly, leaning closer to inspect the baby. "Yes, a child born with both male and female essences. A miracle. His female reproductive organs are more dominant, meaning he can bear children, but not father them. This is a sign, a blessing from the goddess." Tears of joy flowed freely down Amayala's cheeks. "Carrier or not, he is still my son," she said, her voice filled with fierce love. "After all these years of heartache, the goddess has finally heard my prayers." Just then, the heavy footsteps of High Chief Kenan echoed outside the hut. He rushed inside, his face etched with worry as he heard the infant's cries. "Amela, is everything all right?" His deep voice filled the room, full of concern. "How are my wife and child?" Amayala beamed at him, her face glowing with maternal pride. "The goddess has blessed us with a son, my husband." Kenan hurried to her side, his eyes falling upon the tiny bundle in Amayala's arms. His expression softened as he saw his child for the first time. He reached out, gently lifting his newborn son into his strong arms. But as he examined the baby, his brow furrowed. What is this?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly, as he noticed the unusual appearance of the infant's genitals. "Why does he look like this?" The priestess stepped forward, her hands raised in a gesture of calm. "He is a carrier, High Chief," she explained, her tone reverent. "A child touched by the goddess herself. Such children are rare, but they have always been regarded as sacred. It is a great honor." Kenan blinked, stunned. He had heard the ancient tales of carriers, but they had always seemed like distant myths, stories from a time long past. "But I thought carriers were extinct," he murmured, still trying to process the priestess's words. How could the goddess give us such a child? A child who is different, who— He hesitated, his voice dropping lower. "Who will not be able to take over from me." Amayala, still lying on the bed, reached out and touched her husband's arm, her eyes blazing with determination. "He is our son, Kenan," she said firmly. "Carrier or not, he was given to us by the goddess. Do not question the gift we have been given." Kenan's gaze softened as he looked at his wife, then back down at their son. His heart, which had been full of doubt moments ago, now swelled with love and protectiveness. "You are right, Amayala," he said finally, nodding. "The goddess has blessed us, and I will love him as I would any other child." He gently placed a kiss on his son's forehead, whispering, "He is ours." The priestess smiled, her old eyes twinkling with approval. "He will grow to be a symbol of unity, she said, her voice full of conviction. He will bring blessings not just to your family, but to the entire tribe. Amayela nodded, tears still glistening in her eyes. He shall be called Daoyi, she whispered, a name that means blessing, for that is what he is. Kenan held his son close, his once troubled heart now at peace. Daoyi, he echoed, the name rolling off his tongue like a prayer. Our blessing. As the moon continued to shine high above, the village slept peacefully, unaware of the extraordinary child who had just been born among them. But soon they would all know Daoyi's name, and the legend of the carrier would be reborn. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the Kampe village. At 5 years old, Daoyi ran barefoot through the grassy fields, his laughter ringing out as he tried to keep up with his mother, Amayela. Her hands were full of freshly gathered herbs, the scent of mint and wildflowers trailing behind her. She turned to look at her son, a smile tugging at her lips. Daoyi, be careful. Don't run too fast. You'll trip, Amayela called out, her voice warm but firm. I'm not a baby anymore, Mama, Daoyi said, puffing out his small chest with pride. He slowed down slightly, but still darted ahead, his energy boundless. Amayela chuckled softly, watching her son with a mixture of fondness and concern. Not a baby, You still need to hold my hand when we cross the stream. Daoyi rolled his eyes but grinned, reaching out to take his mother's hand as they approached the small stream that divided the fields from the village. The cool water splashed against their feet as they stepped across the smooth stones, the rhythmic sound calming in the late afternoon air. As they reached the other side, Amayela knelt down, pulling Daoyi close to her. Look here, she said, pointing to a cluster of small blue flowers growing at the base of a tree. These are called moonflowers. They only bloom when the moon rises. Daoyi crouched beside her, his eyes wide with curiosity. Why do they only bloom at night? Amayela smiled, brushing her fingers gently over the delicate petals. The goddess blesses them with a special kind of magic. Just like she blesses all things in this world, some things need the sun, and some things need the moon. Mama, what are these herbs for? He asked, his eyes shining with curiosity. These herbs are for a fever. These are for a wound, his mother replied, pointing out the different herbs and their uses. Mama, you are so wise to know all these. Daoyi looked with wonder at his mother. Throwing her head back with laughter, she gave him an amused look. The goddess is ever so gracious to bless us with various talents, she replied. His mother's reply got Daoyi more curious. If knowing different herbs and their uses was one of his mother's talent, then what was his talent? What is my talent, Mama? He asked. Amayela looked to the skies. You have a special one, my son. But I don't feel special, Daoyi murmured, lowering his gaze. The other kids, they don't play with me. Amayela's heart ached at her son's words. She knew how isolated Daoyi had become, how the other children didn't know how to treat him. Some were afraid, others were simply unkind. She squeezed his hand gently, trying to find the right words. They're just children, Daoyi, she said softly. They don't understand yet. But one day, they'll see how strong and important you are. Daoyi looked up at her, hope and uncertainty mingling in his expression. Will I ever be like them, Mama? Amayela paused, feeling the weight of the question. You'll be like them in some ways, and in other ways, you'll be different. But that doesn't mean you're any less. It means you're more. Daoyi leaned into his mother, resting his head against her shoulder. I like being me, but sometimes I wish the others liked me too. Amayilla wrapped her arms around him, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of his head. They will, my love. In time, they will. They sat together for a while, the quiet sounds of the forest around them. Daoyi felt safe in his mother's arms, but a small part of him still longed for something more, a connection with the other children, a sense of belonging. As they stood up to head back to the village, Daoyi spotted a group of children playing near the edge of the clearing. He paused, his gaze lingering on them. A girl from the group, a beta, glanced over and snickered before whispering something to the others. They laughed, casting furtive glances at Daoyi. Daoyi's shoulders sagged, and he lowered his gaze, trying to ignore the sting of their laughter. Amayella noticed, her expression hardening. She stepped closer to her son, her voice quiet but firm. Daoyi, look at me. He hesitated, then slowly lifted his eyes to meet hers. You are not less than them. Do you understand? Amayella's voice was steady, her gaze unwavering. You are not less because you are different. One day, they will see that. Daoyi swallowed hard, trying to blink away the tears that threatened to spill. But what if they don't? They will, Amayella said, her voice gentle now, because you will show them. You will show them what it means to be kind, to be strong, and to carry the light of the goddess in your heart. Daoyi nodded, though his heart still felt heavy. As they walked back to the village, he stole one last glance at the children, wishing, just for a moment, that he could be like them. But deep down, a small spark of hope flickered.